I've enjoyed this week. I hope you have too. You've heard from me a couple times, and we've introduced this theme, If You Really Want to Help. And that's based on this book, which is now available. Kurt Candler, the author of this book, is here, and copies of the book are available at the table. You want to pick one of those up for sure. So I've talked a couple times, and you've done great. And as you know, for most of my classes, I love bringing in guest speakers so that they can talk out of their experience and their own perspective. And when I first got involved in global ministry, just a few years beyond where you are, I was in seminary here at BBS, first starting to get involved in the global ministry and having some of the thoughts that I've been sharing with you, like maybe there's a better way, right, than the West to the rest. Maybe God is at work in other places, and maybe what could it look like to come alongside those brothers and sisters in true partnership? And at the time, I couldn't find anybody else speaking that language. Very few other people writing books about that. Until 2007, on a trip to Kenya, where I met Kurt Candler, and he had just begun the 410 Bridge, and I was on the very first vision trip with that organization, just exploring what it might look like. What is God doing here? How could we, like Philip in Acts chapter 8, see evidence of God at work and then come alongside that? And it has been a true joy and a pleasure over the last however many years it's been, since 2007, to work with Kurt in Kenya, in Uganda, in Haiti, and now in Guatemala. And so I'm so glad that he's here. He's flown up here from Atlanta to spend the next couple days with us. So would you please welcome Kurt Candler?
Thanks, Paul. I can barely see that timer back there, so I'm going to set my phone because I learned a long time ago that blessed is the guest speaker who keeps good time, for he shall be invited back. Hey, good morning. There you go. Good morning. Good morning. Paul, I can't believe it's been, I guess, 18 years. I mean, you have aged way better than I have. Really grateful to be here this morning, and I'm going to spend some time with you tomorrow and Friday as well. Really grateful that you guys would invite me in to speak about something that I believe is at the heart, that kind of lies in the heart of our shared calling, and that is this idea of poverty. And I think you are probably thinking, wow, Wednesday morning we get to talk about poverty. Well, that's exciting. But we do. I think it's an important topic. It's a topic that I have really committed my life's work to. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But it's an important topic that really demands our attention. I think it's a topic that demands our compassion. And in my view, it's a topic that demands a fresh perspective. And we're going to talk about a fresh perspective here this morning. Before I get started, I want to tell you a little bit about me so you have a sense of kind of who's up here, who's speaking to you. I'm not a professor. I'm not an academic. I don't have any initials behind my name. I'm not a pastor. I've never worked in a church. I work with a lot of churches and have for a number of years, but I'm not a pastor. I'm just a guy. A guy who loves Jesus, who is grateful for what he's done in my life. And my testimony is that just give me the next right thing to go do, and I'll go do that. My way was clearly not working in my life, and give me the next right thing to go do, and I'll trust you with the results. And that's what I've done for the last 20 some odd years. And coming out of, and what you also need to know about me is I'm a business guy. I've come out of the marketplace. I have always been very entrepreneurial in my career. I liked starting organizations from nothing to something, and that something provides hopefully real value to the people that it serves. And I love the label entrepreneur, though I really think that what it really means for me is that I realized very early on in my career that I was not going to make a very good employee. I wanted to be in charge, making the decisions and being held responsible for those decisions. And so I'm a very direct, very blunt guy. And I think God's gifted me with a limited vocabulary. I just kind of use the same words over and over again. And turns out until I really want to make my point, and I make it very directly. And people will typically say to me, "Hey, Kurt, no, you should feel free to be direct." No, I like that, until I am. And then they're kind of taken back. They take a step back and go, "Wow, that dude runs a ministry. That's kind of weird." But I am direct and I am blunt, and maybe some of that will come out today. My family and I went to, I came face to face with this next right thing to go do. And that next right thing in my story, which I don't have time to get into, is I was supposed to go build a school in Uganda, in the middle of nowhere, Uganda, a school that would house 100 kids. They were in a mud and sticks building. It was awful, and I felt like I was being called to go build a school building. And so I threw my family of 3 kids at the time. They were, 10 and 11 and 12. On a plane with my wife and a friend, and we went to Uganda and we built this school building. And I thought that I was going there to make a change for generations, really. I mean, there's generations of kids that would use this school building, and I really thought that I was going to make a difference. I thought I was really helping. And I was there after a couple days, and I realized that what we were doing was really of no moment. I mean, it didn't matter. I thought I was going to make a real difference. And was it helpful? It was. They had a permanent classroom building that they could attend school. There was a small little water project that would bring safe water to the school. They had desks and they had textbooks. But I look back on that and I'm a bit mortified at things that I did. Now, God has a way, and only He can redeem all of that. But coming out of that, I came back to the U.S. and I realized that there had to be a better way to engage the poor. There had to be. Because what I saw, all of the organizations that I saw over there, the UN, NGOs, government organizations, there was still extreme poverty. And I was like, well, all this money is being spent. Why is that the case? And it became a bit of a student of that. And actually, Dr. Mack gave me a book. And it was a very thin little book and had a really super sexy title to it. It was something like Making Your Cross-Cultural Strategic Partnerships Work. I mean, it's clearly written by an academic. I read it, but the words jumped off the page to me. And out of that spawned an organization that I started called the 410 Bridge. The 410 Bridge gets its name from 1 Peter 4:10. 1 Peter 4:10 says, everyone should use the gifts that they've received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. We all have gifts. You have gifts, I have gifts, the people we serve have gifts, and we're called to not just use those gifts to serve ourselves. We're supposed to use those gifts to serve others, and this is one of the ways that God administers His grace to us through the service of us to others and others to us. And we love that scripture. That's our namesake scripture. But it doesn't really tell you a lot about what 410 Bridge does. The reason the 410 Bridge exists, and we say it this way, the reason we exist is because we believe that we have to redefine this war on poverty. We have to redefine what it means to win it. We have to redefine what it means for the people actually living in extreme poverty. And I think, importantly, we have to redefine how we fight that battle together. That's the reason we exist. And what we do in 4 countries today, soon to be hopefully 6 countries, is we adopt communities and we walk with entire communities of people for an extended period of time. So we are a mile deep and an inch wide. We walk with the indigenous leaders in those communities to see long-term sustainable change so they ultimately get to a point where they graduate from the relationship with us and they can continue their journey of development long after we leave. That's our model. And I could talk for hours on that. That's what I wrote, and you read the book. You can get a sense of what everything that we do. But I also learned long ago that, and really in the business world, that we rise and fall on our definitions. If you're going to go solve a problem in the business world, you better define that problem pretty well because you could ultimately put a solution in that solves a different problem. So we rise and fall in our definitions. And so we're going to do something a little dangerous this morning. And so we're going to have to all act like adults here, which we all are. I actually want you to pull out your phones. So pull out your phone, and you have permission. And if you guys could bring up the first Menti, that would be great. And you can see, you can either scan this QR code, or you can go to menti.com, MENTI.com, and put in the code 57133993. It's at the top there. It's kind of small, but you can see it. And I want you have 10 answers to this that you can do. I want 10 words. You don't need to talk to your neighbor. It's not a group activity. Just 10 words that you would use to define poverty. Put those in there. You can do up to 10. You don't have to do all 10, but you can't do more than that. And it's going to create a word map here of what everybody in this room, the words that everybody in this room uses to define poverty. So I'll give you a minute to do that. Make sure you hit submit at the end, and this page should fill up. These are words you use to define poverty. Kind of interesting. So we're seeing words like lacking, poor, which is just another form of the word poverty, so I don't think that counts. But in need, low income, destitute. Lack of resources is up there. You know, if we had 1,000 people in this room, 10,000 people in this room, over my experience, we would see a lot of the similar words up here. Less fortunate is up there. Again, in need, hopeless, struggling, lack of income, unfortunate. All right, that's good. I'm going to actually take a picture of that because I might come back to it in a minute. All right, let's go to the next one. And there's another question here. Go to the next slide. And the next one is, what are the words that you would use? You guys can advance that in the back. There's an arrow in the lower left-hand corner. In the Menti, go back to the Menti. And then see that arrow in the lower left-hand corner? Left-hand corner. There you go. There you go. Okay. Hit that. And now the next question I want you guys to fill out is words up to 10, again, that you would use for solutions to poverty. What do you think words would be that indicate solutions to poverty? I'll give you a minute to do that. Solutions, money, opportunity, knowledge, training, resources, development, Jesus. Jesus is like the VBS answer to every question, right? Opportunity, support. Empowerment is up there. Jobs was up there. All right, that's good. That's good. Thank you for doing that. Is that interesting? A little bit interesting, right? We all have fairly common ideas of words that we use around defining this word poverty, and then also kind of what the solutions might be. All right, we can go back to the PowerPoint now. Thank you. You know, when I look at those, it reminds me of when I became a parent. I have 4 kids. When my firstborn child was born, his name is Michael. He's in his early 30s now. When he was born, if somebody were to come to me and have said, "Hey, Kurt, what do you and Erica hope for Michael?" 18, 22, 25 years, 30 years, whenever he ultimately leaves your home, what do you hope for him when he leaves your house, when he leaves your home? What do you hope for Michael? I would not have said, man, I hope Michael has a bunch of stuff. I hope he wants for nothing. I hope he has a lot of money. I hope he has all the furniture he needs. I hope he has a bunch of stuff. No parent is going to say that. What they are going to say is because I hope my son has a strong faith in Jesus. I hope he has a strong work ethic. I hope he's honest. I hope he has character. I hope he has integrity. I hope he can learn from me how to persevere during difficult times. We talk about character issues. We don't talk about stuff, but for some reason, when we think about this idea of poverty, we think about it in terms of materiality. We think about it in terms of money, resources. And I'm telling you that that's where we need a fresh perspective. And so the way that we say it is this: poverty is not defined as a material problem. It's an issue of worldview. I firmly believe this. And this is not necessarily popular. Poverty is not defined as a material problem. It's an issue of worldview. Now this word worldview is a word that people kind of get all wrapped around the axle on, right? It's a weird kind of word. It's filled with, to some, with a high degree of religiosity. It's kind of a loaded word. It's just a word, okay? It's just a word. And what it means is it's the lens in which you see the way the world works or the way the world should work. We all have a worldview. It's the conversation we're having in our head. It's the story that we're telling ourselves to be true, right? And the power of worldview is that worldview drives the choices that we all make. And the choices that we make drive the actions we take. Worldview, how you think the world works or the world should work, the conversation you're having in your head, that drives the choices you make every day. If you think an exam is going to be easy, you are going to make a different choice than someone who thinks it's going to be pretty difficult. Let me give you another example. There's an old saying, you've probably heard it 100 times, maybe you haven't, I don't know, but I grew up with it, and it was like, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. There's a bunch of scripture behind these kind of concepts. But it basically means that as you think and how you think is going to drive the choices that you make. Another example would be someone with a victim mentality. A victim mentality is basically, I'm going to oversimplify it, but it basically means, hey, look at, if I have a victim mentality, I'm saying, look at all of the things that are happening to me. Look at all these things that are happening to me. And you should have sympathy on me because all of these things are happening to me. And someone with a victim mentality is going to make very different choices and take very different actions than someone that takes personal responsibility, who believes that they have a part in the things that are happening to them. And so this worldview is super, super powerful. And what we've learned is that worldview will do more to help a community thrive or live in deprivation than anything else. There's a book by Darrow Miller, D-A-R-R-O-W, not Darrell, but Darrow Miller, called Discipling Nations. And it just was a super impactful book to me. And it's on this issue of worldview. And he talks about worldview in a variety of ways. But he says this. He says, a worldview does more to influence people's flourishing, their prosperity or poverty, than does their physical environment or other circumstances. What I would say, a little bit stronger than that, from what I've seen over the last almost 20 years, is that worldview does more to influence people's flourishing or not, whether they thrive or live in deprivation, than anything else. Do they need resources? They do. Actually, they have everything that they need to change the quality of their life. God's given them everything that they need to change the quality of their life. In my view, what they need is to shift their worldview to a Christian, biblical worldview. Darrell Miller talks about worldview, and he puts, again, I'm oversimplifying, but he puts things in three big buckets. He talks about an animistic worldview that's pretty prevalent in the developing world, especially kind of in a tribal world, that says that, well, it's not really up to me. It's up to God or the gods, and sometimes the gods are angry. Maybe the gods are angry at my ancestors because they did something wrong, and I'm suffering because of it. I really have no part in anything that's happening to me because really, in animism, it's just up to God or gods. And if they're angry at me, and I'm going to get punished. So why try? And animism kind of leads to this idea of just, significant apathy, right? Not taking responsibility because it's really nothing I can do, right? The other big bucket that he talks about, that Miller talks about, is a secular worldview. And a secular worldview is where we are increasingly living. It's a lack of a spiritual force, a spiritual presence in our worldview, meaning we're all just cogs in the wheel. It's all random. It doesn't really matter. This is all there is. And a secular worldview ultimately leads just to chaos because we all just live for ourselves and there's no higher power. But then he talks about a theistic worldview where this is the only worldview that can ultimately solve a poverty problem because God created things with order. He created things with purpose. He created things to work a certain way. And our desire or our inability to follow that order doesn't mean that the order doesn't exist. In a secular worldview, they don't believe that it was created with order. And that's why it leads to chaos. But as Christians, just because we choose not to follow how God made things to work doesn't mean that that's still not true. It is. We've just chosen not to follow it. And so a theistic worldview is fundamental to really helping people understand that they have everything they need to solve their poverty problem, to change the quality of their life. Do they still need resources? Yeah, they do. But this is the way that I've said it before. I said poverty is not solely the absence of material resources, but it's tied to the story that individuals tell themselves, the narrative they hold about their own worth, their potential, and the world around them. Super important, people. In my experience, 95% of the organizations that I mingle with, I work with in kind of my world, are addressing the poverty problem from a purely physical perspective. They see the poor as a set of problems to be solved. They don't see the poor as the solution to their poverty problem. And when you see the poor as the solution to their poverty problem, you no longer want to lead. You want them to lead. You want them to take leadership, and you want to follow them. When you believe that the poor are the solution to their poverty problem, you no longer want to do for them, you want to do with them. Do they still need help? Do they still need resources to improve the pace and the depth of their development? Yeah, sure they do. But they need to lead. And we need to help them shift their worldview from whatever it is today to a Christian biblical worldview that says, God's created me for a purpose, I'm loved, I'm forgiven, and therefore I should be a forgiver, and I have responsibilities. I've got responsibilities to be a godly spouse, a godly parent, godly school teacher, godly business person, godly community leader. Those are the responsibilities that I have. And God, again, has given me everything I need to get started. I need to start with what I have. And I think where we get it wrong, this fresh perspective that I'm trying to impart to you, is where we get it wrong is that we believe this myth that anything we do for the poor must be a good thing. I'm helping. And I can tell you that that is absolutely wrong. That everything or anything that you do for the poor is not necessarily a good thing. In his book, Toxic Charity, Bob Lupton says this, and this is one of our guiding principles. He says, when you do something for someone that has the capacity to do it for themselves, you disempower them. When you do something for someone who has the capacity to do it for themselves, you disempower them. We never have any intention. We don't get up in the morning and go, hey, I can't wait to go out there and disempower people because my intentions are good. I have really good intentions. I want to help people struggling with poverty. If they have need, I want to help them. But are we really helping them? In most cases, we are not. And so I think what I'm excited about in being here is that I get to talk to people who have an opportunity to change that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow maybe. But you have an opportunity to really impart this fresh perspective. And are the organizations that you're supporting, is your church, your home church, as they work with people struggling in extreme poverty, are they thinking about it in these terms, or are they just solving a problem that they think is contributing to someone's poverty problem? In her book, Total Truth, Nancy Pearcey, who is another kind of hero of mine, she's this Christian guru on worldview, and she uses really big words, and I have a hard time following it. But she says in her book, Total Truth, she says this. She says a biblical worldview says that the overriding factor, and I think that's really important, it's the overriding factor. It trumps everything else. The overriding factor of the choices we make is our ultimate belief or religious commitment. And so if we can get a group of people to understand a biblical Christian worldview while we walk alongside them in humanitarian ways, but really walk behind them, they'll do, and we've learned this, they'll do more to solve their poverty problem without us than they will with us. Let me go back to another example. Well, let me do this. So given all of that, what do we need to do? Like, how do we actually go and do this? Because it's really difficult to do. It's pretty easy to go do a water project. It's pretty easy to go build a classroom building like I did 20 years ago. But to get an entire community of people to think differently is a very difficult thing to do. So how do we do it? Well, to me, it starts with us. I learned really early on. Again, you got to understand, I came out of the business world, which is, I feel like, much easier than the ministry world. I think the business world is much easier than running a nonprofit. It just is. The nonprofit world is filled with emotion. It's not very measurable. We think that anything we do to help people must be a good thing. And so what we realized was that we couldn't be successful. We knew this. We knew that we couldn't be successful in helping the people somewhere in the world who are struggling with poverty without support from the West. We knew that. But what I learned that I didn't know was that we couldn't be successful in that work until we changed the paradigm of how the West engages the poor. Our worldview is jacked up when it comes to the poor. It's jacked up. Let me give you an example. We talked a little earlier about a victim mentality. Imagine somebody who has a victim mentality, living in a community somewhere, and they believe that God or the gods are angry at them and things are happening to them. The government is corrupted, there's tribal warfare, and they're sitting back not taking any responsibility for any of that and just basically saying, look at all these things that are happening to me. I'm not going to try. That person is never going to be able to be empowered until they change how they think. By that I mean you can't empower somebody against their will. We can't empower you against your will. We can put you in an empowering environment, but you have to embrace that empowerment. You have to own that empowerment. But on the same side, on our side of the bridge, if you see the poor as victims of their poverty, if you see the poor as, these poor people who can't do for themselves, look at all the things that are happening to them, you can never create an empowering environment for them. You can never empower them because you think, or we think, that they're victims. And that's got to change. That's the worldview on our side of the bridge that's got to change. We have to change the paradigm of how the West engages the poor globally, domestically, and it doesn't start and end with material resources. It starts with a biblical Christian worldview. It starts with changing how people think from whatever it is today to something that is proven that will work, and that is a theistic worldview. But we don't do that because it's a lot harder to do that. The other thing is so again, it starts with us, but I also think that outside, my personal opinion, and I think I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid here, because we work in a holistic community development model, meaning that we adopt a place and we walk with that place in all areas of need for a long, extended period of time. It's indigenously led. We have a group of leaders in the community that are pulling us, right? And we walk with them holistically. And I believe that outside of a holistic context, you can't help the poor. Again, the poor are not a set of problems to be solved. They are the solution to their poverty problem. So if you see them as a water problem, if you see them as an education problem, you're just going to silo those solutions, and you're going to go off and do those, and you're going to think you're being really helpful. And maybe you're solving a water problem, and maybe you're solving an education problem, but you're not solving a poverty problem. And so I don't mind. We need people to come in and solve water problems. We need people to come in, organizations to come in and help us with education. But don't tell me that you're solving a poverty problem, because you're not, right? So a holistic approach is really the only way. You can't help a child. You sponsor a child, you can't help a child outside of the context that they live in. You may be sponsoring a child and you're being helpful, but they're still walking long distances for water, or they still go to a bad school. What problem are you really solving? And are you asking those questions of the organizations that you support? Are you asking the questions of your church? Are we asking the critically thinking questions that we need to ask in order to solve that problem? I had one other thing about holistic. I'll come back to it. And then lastly, I'm going to start landing this plane here, is a biblical Christian worldview in everything. What does that mean? In everything we do, we found that in everything that we do, a program, a project, we have to impart a biblical Christian worldview. And we've found that has more impact on people because it's presented to them in a context that they're eager to listen to. Let me give you an example. We do entrepreneurship training. We have to teach people how to run a profitable business. And it's stuff that we would find just to be almost common sense. Things like, hey, you need to keep good records. You need to know what's coming in and going out. The money in your pocket is not yours. The money in your pocket is your business's. So quit spending your business's money. You need to separate you from your business. The business needs to pay you. If you run a store and you sell food and drinks, and if you are eating your food and drinking your drinks, you are stealing from yourself. Basic business kind of principles, right? And as good as that is, we need to layer on top of that a Christian biblical worldview that says what God talks about when he talks about money. What God talks about when he says how we need to be good stewards of the resources that we've been given. That our neighbors are our customers. And we can't have a successful business without customers. And if everybody in our community hates us, we need to repair, and he wants us to repair those relationships so that we can have a successful business. Education is another one. Education was a big one up in those word maps. It was in both of those. Lack of education was how we define it, and a solution was education. But I'll go back to what C.S. Lewis says. I love C.S. Lewis. He said on education, education without values, as good as it is, only seems to make man a more clever devil. And he's right. Education, without values, as good as it is, only seems to make man a more clever devil. So it's more than just educating kids in our communities. It's about imparting biblical virtues to them. Cooperation and trust and perseverance, faithfulness, things like that. And when we do that, and we layer on in everything that we do a biblical Christian worldview to the humanitarian programs that we're doing, trying to help them physically, you come to realize that people are not bodies without souls, and they're not souls without bodies, they're both. And that's what we want to impart in our communities. So in everything we do have a biblical Christian worldview. And what we've found over the last 20 years is that communities come to a place where they can graduate out of the 410 Bridge relationship. We have outcomes. We measure outcomes. We don't measure process. What I mean by that is we don't care how many people go through our training. What we care about is, are we lifting household incomes in our community? Are kids graduating from school and are going on to secondary, tertiary, and university schools? We're measuring outcomes. And when we do that, and we identify those outcomes with the leaders, and as we approach those outcomes, we can kind of raise the flag that says, look, you are doing more in your community without us than you are with us. And it's time for us to go on and help another community. And we want to have a big celebration of what God's done with this partnership. And we have a huge celebration. We've graduated, 13, I think, communities. We just graduated our 13th community last August in Kenya. And they graduate from a holistic community development model. And this word development, again, we rise and we fall in our definitions. This word development means that which people do for themselves. It's not what we've done for them. It's what we've done with them. And so I want to challenge you this morning as I'm going to pray in a minute and get us out of here, but I want to challenge you this morning to begin to think critically about how we help people. And are we really helping people? Or are we just feeling good about ourselves? Good intentions are not good enough. And if we really want to help, we got to start thinking critically. You need to start thinking critically with your churches, with the organizations you support, in the businesses that you may run one day. Are you helping, or are you just feeling good about yourself? Because we have to separate what we give and how we give it from our need to feel good about ourselves. And it starts with us. Hey, I want to thank you for letting me be here this morning. I'm grateful. Let me pray for you, and then we're going to get out of here. Everlasting Father, we are just grateful, every day grateful. You're amazing. Thank you for loving us the way that you do. Thank you for loving us first. Pray, Father, that you would show us every day just a little bit more how to love you more every day. Father, I thank you for this student body. I thank you for this university. I thank you for the time we've had here this morning. And I pray, Father, that something that was said may spark a critical thought, a question that needs to be asked, so that in our shared calling to care for the poor, that we can be more effective at that in a way that not only is effective, but honoring to you and your kingdom and your design. So, Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you for Dr. Mack and this whole week. Pray, Father, that you would be with us for the rest of this week. And most of all, Father, we thank you for your son, Jesus, and all he did for us. We are not worthy, but we are grateful. And it's in his mighty name. Amen. Thank you all very much.